there is often a negative internet cycle around any new character coming out, and we've been releasing mobile characters for over a decade. And so I look back on the mobile characters released, and I heard very similar things about Yasuo, and he's pretty cool, and similar things about Silas, and you know, he had some balance issues, but he's pretty cool at the end of the day. And similar things about Viego, and he had some balance issues, but he's pretty cool at the end of the day, right? And every once in a while we make a character who's too mobile. Zeri was too mobile, and there's a very real risk about Mbessa, right? Like, there's risks there. But I think it's very, very easy to get into this negative cycle where you just see people like kind of like bashing the new thing. And one of the things people love to bash is a character that has a dash, even though League of Legends has like many characters who have dashes. And so to me, the key is like, it's not don't make mobile characters. That's not actually reflected by like what players want. Like, if players wanted non-mobile characters, by the way, not saying we can't make them. Lux is very fun, very, very cool. But like the idea that nobody wants mobile characters is kind of like a little bit against like the actual characters you see people playing. Again, people also play Lux. And they also play Jinx. So immobile characters can be very fun as well. But like this idea that no one likes mobile characters, I think is very, very off base. Like, mobile characters tend to be some of our most popular and most fun characters. Sorry, I'm word salading again. I'm spinning in circles. The key with a mobile character is that you need to make sure it has weaknesses, right? You need to make sure it's like, hey, here's what it does. It's super dashy. Now, what are the things it doesn't do? What are the places where it suffers? What are the places where it has trouble, right? You can dash a lot, but if you have certain downsides, that can be okay, right? You're just wrong. No one says that. No one wants to play against it. That's why they're so controversial. Tryhard Ellie, I'm sorry to say, but you're just wrong. I don't know. I don't know how to tell you this, but it's a thing where many internet forums become like fairly echo chambery, and so it's very easy to go to an internet forum and think that everybody has an opinion, when in reality it is a vocal minority of players. And so what we tend to see is that, are there people who are frustrated by Yasuo? Yes, 100%. He is frustrating to play against for some people. Is that everybody? No. And are there people who really love Yasuo? 100%. A really easy example of this actually is the difference between North America and China and Korea when you compare who they find the most frustrating. North America actually puts Yasuo fairly high in their frustration lists. If you like ask them, you know, all the champions in the game, who's the most frustrating, Yasuo is fairly up there. In the case for Eastern players, Yasuo tends to be in the middle of the pack. Like, he's not actually all that standout in terms of being frustrating. And actually, one of the things that a number of Eastern players tend to find more frustrating is weird characters who do weird things in their games. Like Iverns and Bards of the world and things like that. And so, which by the way tend to be characters that NA players tend to praise quite a bit. It's like, oh, there's that new, unique, different character. And it's like, yeah, that could be good. Not saying those characters are bad. But what I'm trying to do is like, there's a big regional difference even between what different people may find frustrating and satisfying to play against or not, right? And so, yeah, it's mobile characters can be frustrating, but like kind of the idea that nobody ever wants to play against them, I think is a bit off, because a lot of people like playing them, which generally means that they're going to be playing against them as well, things like that. Another bias that tends to happen is old people versus young people. Younger players are hype beasts, and so they tend to be much more happy playing with and against mobile characters. So younger players look at characters like, say, Genji in Overwatch, or Yasuo, or Pyke, or whatever, and they're like, oh my god, the ninja samurai pirate. I want to play the ninja samurai pirate that dashes around, and they play it, right? Younger players love Jet. They love Raze. They love they tend to like mobile characters in games like Val as well. You just see younger players tend to be more about that mobility fantasy, where like older players tend to be much less about mobility and tend to prefer more simple characters like the Morganas and the Zyras of the world that aren't as dashy. And so, yeah. Let's put it another way. Like, if people genuinely hated mobility and didn't want it in the game, we would know that and we wouldn't make mobile characters, right? Are mobile characters frustrating? Yes, 100% they can be frustrating. I'm not trying to deny that. But at the end of the day, League is a game that needs to be enjoyable to play. And a lot of people enjoy mobile fantasies. And a lot of people don't necessarily mind playing against someone who is mobile. And this is another thing that I want to like note that's important, is there is a big difference between this character is giga frustrating and I hate the game and I never want to play it again. And yeah, I was frustrated when that character beat me, but you know, that's how the game goes. What I mean by this is like, of course people are going to be more frustrated by Yasuo than they are by Lux. Because Yasuo does more frustrating things. He quite literally does more frustrating things. But that doesn't necessarily mean frustration minimization is what you should be pursuing in the game. That doesn't necessarily mean that every character should be as immobile as Lux. When you make a mobile character, you are taking on frustration. But there's a difference between this character is broken and makes you want to stop playing and feels like the worst thing ever, and this character is, you know, middle of the pack frustration compared to Lux, as an example. And then also you'll note in the chat here, there's a number of people who would rather play against a mobile character than Lux. Like, I guarantee you there's a number of people who like look at Lux and they're like, could you give me Rakan? Could you give me Rel? Could you give me a character with dashes who very honestly engages on me and tries to burst me down versus this crazy support girl who pokes me from 3,000 range? Like, everybody has like different preferences, right? About what they're interacting with. Yeah. And so, sorry, I've gone off on a tangent, but what I'm trying to get at is very often people come into the chat and they'll say, everybody hates this thing. Why do you do it? And very often that perspective tends to be a bit biased and tends to be a bit more skewed. And if everybody truly hated that thing, we wouldn't do it. Like, that would probably be something we shouldn't do. But in regards to mobility, you are going to see that outpouring of like, this is broken on every mobile character we do. I've been working on the game for over a decade, and I see this cycle. Every single mobile character we do, there's some group of players who are like, you've made another mobile character, League of Legends is dying from mobility creep, the game is over. And then watching how those characters play out over time, most of them end up being great. They end up being popular and fun and, you know, mostly good for the game. And are they a little frustrating? Yeah, but not like untenably frustrating. And to be fair, every once in a while we screw up and we go too far in some direction and we actually make a character who's fairly problematic. I always reference Zeri here, but Zeri is an example of, oops, I took mobility too far. And, you know, we had to like do some pretty major work on her to make her more reasonable, right? But there's a reason games like League have mobile characters. And a lot of players really, really, really like that experience and would not enjoy, you know, playing like a Lux or something like that. Now, I'll follow this up with how to say it. It was about mobility. My brain just exploded. I can't remember what it was going to be. Oh, I'll follow this up with I think that's something's important to think about. That is more true today. Is League has quite legitimately been mobility creeped. And by the way, I don't think that's a bad thing. You probably have noticed I'm generally down with mobility. I don't think it's a bad thing that League has more mobility than it is today on average than in the original 40 roster. I think that's a very real statement. It's very true, and I think it's good because I think a lot of people like those big outplay moments, dashing around. That's fun. What I do think it means, though, is that we need to make sure that the immobile champions, the ones that don't have the mobility, feel like they get something for not being able to dash around. And that, I think, is one of the bigger risks of mobility creep. It's actually not, oh, the game's more mobile. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think the bigger risk of mobility creep is for some of the immobile champions that we make, what about them makes that immobility okay? What about them makes them get killed by a Yasuo and look at that game and be like, but my character still makes sense, right? And this is an example is why Jinx has 725 attack range. Unlimited with rockets, right? Unless you run out of mana. This is, for example, why Lux has just this crazy poke kill combo from off your screen, right? This is an example why Brand can like push his ult and kill an entire team by himself sometimes, right? Is that it's important. This is why Nasus has Wither, right? Like it's important that like, okay, so I'm immobile. What does that mean for me? An example of our thinking about this years ago, which I think ended up being really good, was the Juggernaut update. The Juggernaut update came into updating the Juggernauts with a problem. And the problem was, why would you play Darius when Jarvan and Vi and Yasuo exist? Like, this was before we changed Darius. It was like, why would you play Darius, an immobile guy, or Garen, or whoever, when there's these other mobile guys that are also fairly tanky, not Yasuo's case, but, Jarvan and Vi and stuff. They just do it better, right? And kind of what we asked ourselves for the Juggernauts is, okay, well, what do these characters get if we're going to make them immobile? Like, what is the crazy stuff they're going to do to make it worth taking a Darius over a Jarvan? And this is why, by the way, Darius gets like 10 million AD when he stacks his passive, right? It was kind of like saying, it's like, wait, well, if Darius can't get to you, he probably should have some degree of death touch when he does, right? And so Darius gets to be this like really, really, really oppressive guy in melee range because he can't dash into melee range, right? Nasus has Wither. Olaf has his infinite crowd control duration as long as he's like in melee view, right? And so that's the question I think mobility creep needs to ask. I do not agree with the question mobility creep is a thing, therefore reduce mobility. Again, within limits, right? Like there's such a thing as too much mobility. I personally take it from the perspective of the game is more mobile on average. What do the immobile characters get to make their kits make sense in that world? And this is also why we do things like about a year ago I updated Vel'Koz E. I made it faster. And the reason I did that was Vel'Koz was designed for a less mobile world. And so it felt appropriate that now that the average character in the game Vel'Koz is playing against is a bit more mobile, that he would have a bit more ability to react to them and deal with them, which is why his E was buffed in the way it was. That's the thoughts.